What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into the Frogs Up TCU Sports podcast recording here Thursday morning, our first morning episode. I am Russ Hodges. That is Anthony North. I goofed up and forgot that I had booked a ticket for the Marvels in IMAX tonight, and both of us are busy with work, so we are here recording Thursday morning. We have a lot to talk about today, a lot of TCU basketball news. The Frogs, both the men and the women, tipping off the 2023-2024 season on Monday with a couple of huge wins. We will talk about those. Early signing day was held this week. TCU Football has a huge contest coming up on Saturday against number 7 Texas. So a full slate of TCU content to discuss as we get into our episode today. Anthony, what's going on down there in Texas? How you doing this morning?
Oh man, it's a rainy morning here. I like seeing that natural light come in your window there. It's normally
Yep,
we're
I'm not
nighttime
in
here.
my dungeon. We have a
Your
little bit
cave.
of light coming in here this morning.
Yeah, man, it's all good. We last night was my oldest 8th birthday, so we had big birthday celebration. He also had a soccer game, so it was a big fun night. And yeah, so our normal recording time we had to move to today. So appreciate your flexibility on that. But um, yeah, that's what's been going on here is all birthday season. So now we're finally kind of moving on into holiday season here for
Mhm.
me. It's a busy time, but excited, really excited to talk about these basketball performances. Man, it's fun to see the Frogs playing well. Perhaps a little less excited to talk about the football that we have coming up this weekend.
Yeah, for sure. And this episode will be our first episode in a while where we don't feature football first, but with basketball tipping up on Monday and both the men's and women's teams having a lot of success, we have to hit on that first. So we'll get into that to start off this episode. Before we get into that, though, this episode, of course, is brought to y'all by our friends at Charlie Hustle Clothing Company. Charlie Hustle, vintage made fresh. Go to charliehustle.com. Get your TCU Horn Frog swag, t-shirts, hoodies, sweaters, more. Use the promo code FrogsOWar. Get 15% off all TCU items at charliehustle.com. We also have a promo code 101215 through our partnership with the 1012 Network. If you're interested in purchasing any other apparel on charliehustle.com, use the promo code TEN1215. Get 15% off any non-sale items. Again, TCU basketball season is here. Get your Horn Frog swag. Get out to Schollmeyer. Support the Horn Frogs. Promo code FrogsOWar. Get 15% off all TCU items. All right, let's go ahead and get right into it. TCU men's basketball tipping off the season Monday evening with a non-conference game against Southern, and the Horned Frogs came out with a explosive effort, dominating this game 108-75, the final score. Everybody got into the game, everybody was getting involved. The team stats are terrific for TCU, shooting just over 61% from the field, 43.5% from three-point range. TCU finished the game with 28 assists as a team. That's a phenomenal stat. The Frogs were moving the ball extremely well. They forced 16 Southern turnovers on defense. There was a little bit of a slow start to this game. Southern actually had a lead about 5 or 6 minutes into the first half, but TCU really took over this game halfway through the first half and then just ultimately rolled to a 33-point victory. TCU had 58 points in the paint, 47 points off the bench, 24 fast break points, and 22 points off of turnovers. So TCU doing a lot of things right collectively in this game to start off 1-0. Micah Peavy led the way individually. He had 21 points on 10 of 13 shooting, really efficient performance from the field for him. Emmanuel Miller had a team high 9 rebounds along with 9 points. He was in the game at the very end. I think he was hunting for that double-double, just fell a little bit short there, but a good performance from him. JaKobe Coles got the start for TCU, 17 points and 7 rebounds for him. Jameer Nelson, one of many transfers making their TCU debut on Monday. All around great performance for Jameer, 14 points, 5 steals to lead the defense, and then 6 assists as well. Avery Anderson, the Oklahoma State transfer, had 15 points, 5 assists, and then Trey Tennyson off the bench, the Corpus Christi transfer, with 13 points. So collectively a outstanding performance for TCU. Coach Dixon did mention after the game that the defense was maybe not what he expected coming out. However, I think anytime you can break the century mark in a college basketball game, it's something to be excited for. As TCU is 1-0, their next game will be at home again against Omaha. It'll be a 7 o'clock tip-off time later today. So get out to Schulmeyer and support the Frogs as they look to go for 2-0. Anthony, any thoughts about this performance that we saw from the Frogs on Monday?
Man, this was fun. What a game. This team is going to be really exciting, I think. It's you don't want to take too much away. We talked about how Southern is going to be at the bottom of all of Division 1 basketball this year. So, probably like Coach Dixon said, probably not great that you were trailing for a period here, that you gave up 75 points to them. But love a lot of things here. Seeing Micah Peavy and JaKobe Coles in the starting lineup, and for them to perform at a really, really high level. Micah Peavy to have the offensive output that he had. We're used to his defensive stopper ability, and to go out there and put up 21 points, and he was terrific. And JaKobe Coles with an absurd plus 38 on the game. I mean, when he was in the game, TCU was dominating everything. So that's great to see the two of them getting that chance to start, to see them grow from somewhat support roles the last couple years into these starter roles where they are now a key piece of what TCU is going to do this season. It's really great to see them take that opportunity and make the most of it. The other thing is, man, Avery Anderson and Trey Tennyson off the bench is very scary. Those guys can really play. Avery Anderson was particularly impressive, I think, in this game. Every time he had the ball, it felt like something amazing was going to happen. He, the way he distributed, let's see, he had 5 assists on the game, and 15 points. So, yeah, I think seeing these guys, these transfers come in and really be a key piece as well. It has hopes pretty high. I think Ernest Uday not scoring was unfortunate. He only played 12 minutes. So, I think maybe he was getting a little rest or maybe not getting a lot of runs. Xavier Cork had a pretty nice game, had a bunch of pretty spectacular dunks on runouts. So, a lot of the things that we have talked about that plagued this team a year ago, the poor 3-point shooting, poor free throw shooting, things that tend to be not opponent specific. You don't make your free throws because you're playing Southern. You make your free throws because you make free throws. So I think those are good things to see. And yeah, 1-0. It's a better start than it was last season, certainly, and look to see the Horned Frogs keep it rolling.
Yeah, Coach Dixon had some comments after the game talking about Micah Peavy and how he has earned that starting 2-guard spot due to his defensive ability and the way that he's grown coming into his senior season. And he shot the 3-ball pretty well, I believe, against Texas Wesleyan in that exhibition game. In this game, he was more of a cutter, slasher who's making a lot of great moves to the basket. But he's going to be a really key player for this offense. If he can show that growth from last year where he really struggled from the perimeter, if he can shoot 3-pointers consistently this season, he might wind up being one of the better players in the conference because the defensive ability is there. He can cut to the rim. He can score at the rim. But if he can become a consistent shooter, that's going to be a whole nother animal for opponents when TCU comes to town. And having, like you said, Avery Anderson and Trey Tennyson off the bench, that's a great combination. Trey Tennyson with his shooting ability is a career 40+% 3-point shooter. You pair that with a guy in Avery Anderson who's a pure point guard with a lot of starting experience from his time at Oklahoma State. This team has legitimate 9 to 10 man depth. As you mentioned, the front court guys were somewhat quiet in this. Ernest Uday was pretty quiet in this game. Xavier Cork had a nice game off the bench, had that emphatic dunk that's been circulating on Twitter. I wouldn't be surprised if throughout this non-conference slate, there's a little bit of a competition to see what the front court is going to look like going into Big 12 play. Isam Mustafa, I think, only played limited minutes in this game like Ernest Uday, and Xavier Cork is obviously the player who's most familiar with Coach Dixon and his system. So I'm interested to see how that shakes out as we get ready for Big 12 play, who's going to be the starting big man at that time and who's going to be coming off the bench. But this team is legitimately 10 guys deep. And it's really exciting that a lot of these players have seemingly found their roles already. When you have so many new players coming in, it could be a challenge to figure out who's going to be starting, who's going to be coming off the bench, who's going to be running point, who's going to be your 3-point shooters playing on the perimeter. So offensively, this was a really nice performance from TCU. And again, we'll see how the Frogs can build on this going into the game against Omaha this evening, which we will be touching on, of course, when we record our upcoming weekend episode. For men's basketball, we also want to point out that early signing day was this week, and pretty significant news for TCU as all 4 of the commits, 3 of them being 4-star players, all signed early. So these guys are locked in, they're ready to go. It includes Micah Robinson, the 4-star forward, David Punch, 4-star forward, Malik Diallo, 4-star center, and Ashton Simmons, the 3-star combo guard. And this is all really important because Jamie Dixon did mention after this win over Southern that Jace Posey and Isaiah Manning, the 2 really talented true freshmen on the roster this year, are likely to redshirt, which it makes sense given how much veteran talent TCU has this year. But when you combine Posey, who's a 4-star player, and Manning, who's a high 3-star, with these 4 early signees, that's 6 players that are going to be almost certainly on your roster next year with a lot of talent. They're going to be very young, of course, but very talented and just very exciting for the future of this program. You know, you look at this roster right now, a lot of these guys are seniors, or, you know, in the case of Chuck O'Bannon, borderline collecting AARP benefits given how long he's been around. But there's going to be some turnover once this season comes to a close. And to have a lot of these players locked up for the future is a huge sign for things to come. So a shout out again. I know we've talked about this recruiting class already. Number 11 class ranked nationally. Huge kudos to Jamie Dixon and his staff.
Yeah. I mean, this is big time. What is it? The 11th ranked nationally? I mean, that is crazy to think for TCU basketball. A huge coup here for Jamie Dixon. And, you know, I think we've seen across the Big 12 where some of these big time recruiting classes come in and contribute immediately. Thus far, Dixon hasn't really had that, but it's definitely looking like next year, giving the roster turnover that we'll have, that these guys are probably going to come in and be at least a big piece of this team going forward. So just, you know, I think big things to come for TCU basketball. Good signing day, and looking forward to seeing these guys in purple.
And sticking with the basketball theme, we also have to hit on the TCU women's basketball team, which had an outstanding performance on Monday. Mark Campbell making his debut as head coach of the Horned Frogs. TCU takes down Oral Roberts 76-56. A pretty noteworthy thing from this game, all 5 starters were transfers. We talked about the number of new players that entered the program under Coach Campbell. Madison Conner from Arizona, she was unbelievable in this game. 30 points to go along with 11 rebounds. Led the team in rebounds, a double-double for her. Most points for a TCU women's basketball player in their debut in school history. So a huge shout out to Madison Conner for having a tremendous performance. Shot the ball incredibly well. Sedona Prince, the 6'7" transfer from Oregon, was also dominant in this game. 15 points to go along with 10 rebounds. and 3 blocks for a double-double. I wouldn't be surprised if she averages anywhere from 3 to 4 blocks per game. With that length and that size, she's going to be a menace for opposing teams in that painted area. Una Jovanovic from Cal State Fullerton, complimentary scoring and facilitating in this game. She had 11 points to go along with 5 assists. Jaden Owens, the Baylor transfer, was running point. She had 7 assists to lead the team. And then Agnes Emma Anopu is going to be a huge part of this team as a two-way player. The Stanford transfer had 7 points, 5 rebounds to go along with 3 steals. So 5 transfers coming in, becoming one unit, and it seems that everybody has already figured out what their role is going to be on both ends of the floor. So TCU getting a 20-point win over Oral Roberts. TCU shot 44% roughly from the field, 39% from three-point range, 28 points in the paint, and 14 second chance points. So all around, big win for TCU. Congratulations to Mark Campbell. First win as head coach of the Horned Frogs. And TCU actually did play last night against Texas A&M Kingsville. Got a huge win there. We're not going to have time to hit on that in this episode. However, we will be touching on that when we record our weekend episode this coming Sunday. So again, a big shout out to the women's basketball team coming out and getting a big win. Both programs. It was an exciting day of basketball at Schollmeyer. Both programs coming out with big wins. Anthony, any thoughts on what you saw from the women's team in this game over Oral Roberts?
Oh, yeah. I watched most of this game. This was a terrific game. Super fun. This team is going to be very, very exciting this season. I'm really pumped for them. It's a program that TCU fans probably haven't followed a whole bunch in the last few years, and probably, frankly, at Frogs of War, we haven't talked about them as much. But I think that this is it's a really exciting team, and I think we'll continue to cover them pretty closely going forward because they're doing big time things. I mean, watching Madison Conner in this game, man, she was terrific. Like, making everything happen, rebounding, scoring, draining threes, distributing. I don't know if our expectations were this. I think we had pretty high expectations for these transfers, particularly Sedona Prince comes in with a big name. She's a pretty well-known player nationally for NIL reasons and for her time at Oregon. But Madison Conner put on a show. She just dazzled. Sedona Prince did her thing, had to sit out for a pretty good portion of this with some foul trouble early, but then didn't foul again the rest of the game. So just a very, very good basketball player. You can see the basketball intelligence out there too. With this team has, the way that they move the ball to each other, tenacious defense, just like crashing the boards. It's a style of basketball that, any basketball fan can get behind. So, I know there's a lot of people out there who might just shrug at women's basketball in general, and you really shouldn't, because this is a lot of fun, and they play a really exciting, skilled version of basketball. And yeah, in addition to Connor, I mean, Jaden Owens coming in at point guard, Mark Campbell spoke extremely high of her coming into the season as, maybe one of the best point guards in the country, in the conference. So she came out with 7 assists. Really, this starting lineup is very strong. And it's the same kind of thing on the men's side, where it's like, how much do you take away from a win over Oral Roberts? There's going to be more challenging days ahead. But it's going to be fun to follow this team for sure.
Yeah, you certainly have to start somewhere. Looking at this non-conference schedule and seeing the opponents TCU women will be facing this year, there are a couple of potential tough ones. Nebraska is on there, but if TCU plays like this and plays the way they played against Texas A&M Kingsville last night, it's very possible that they could go undefeated over the non-conference slate, which would be a tremendous accomplishment for Coach Campbell and his staff, again, in their first year at TCU. And as we get into this non-conference basketball schedule for both the men and the women, we're going to have a lot of basketball content coming up on the Frogs Up podcast and also on our website at frogswar.com as we get toward the end of this TCU football season. So basketball fans, be ready. There's going to be a lot of TCU Horned Frog basketball content coming your way. But we do have to transition here to football momentarily because, yes, we have a huge game coming up this weekend at Amon G Stadium. Saturday, 6:30 kickoff, nationally televised game on ABC. TCU taking on the 7th-ranked Texas Longhorns, who are looking to make a run at not only a Big 12 championship, but also a potential college football playoff berth. We've seen Oklahoma have their hopes dashed in losses to Kansas and Oklahoma State. Texas, right now, the highest ranked team in the conference. This is a game where I immediately think back to 2021 with Baylor in the top 10 coming to Fort Worth against a underachieving TCU football team. At that time, there was a different circumstance with Gary Patterson parting ways. Jerry Kill was his first game as the interim head coach. And Chandler Morris comes out, has the game of his life. TCU comes away with an enormous upset, and Baylor's college football playoff hopes are dashed with that enormous upset. And here we are again in 2023. We have another underachieving TCU football team, and Texas is going to be coming in looking to continue to win and secure a spot not only in the Big 12 title game, but potentially in the college football playoff. So this game, there's going to be a lot on the line. Texas is favored by, I want to say only 9.5 points was the last time I checked, but
okay.
There's reason for that. TCU has been very good against the Longhorns since coming into the Big 12. TCU 8-3 against Texas since coming into the Big 12, and there are some very fond memories that we share of TCU defeating Texas since coming into the Big 12. We'll hit on that in a few minutes, just reflecting on some of our favorite memories. But, for me, looking at this game, there's going to be a question about who starts at quarterback for Texas. Obviously, Quinn Ewers is still a little bit banged up with that AC joint injury. He hasn't played the last couple of games. There's a chance that he plays against TCU this weekend, but there's also a chance that we see Malik Murphy, the backup quarterback who has played over the last couple of games and done some nice things, but has also been prone to turning the ball over a little bit. So that's going to be a storyline to watch, which quarterback takes the field for Texas. And, for TCU defensively, you did really well against Quinn Ewers last season. I think Quinn Ewers completed only about 40% of his passes last year. Mm-hmm. So there's a little bit of a track record of success there. I'm not exactly sure which quarterback I'd rather see, to be honest, given how underwhelming TCU's defense has been this year. But it's going to be a storyline to keep our eyes on as we get closer and closer to Saturday evening. Meanwhile, for the TCU offense, this is going to be a really tough test. Texas is a tremendous defensive team. That defensive line is outstanding. And gosh, I'm trying to think of what this offense can do to win this game. I really think, I brought up 2021, and Chandler Morris had the game of his life against Baylor. How he did it was he made big time throws down the field. He was able to avoid pressure. He was able to scramble for big gains. TCU didn't turn the ball over too much, I believe, in that game against Baylor, but they did just enough offensively in terms of finding big plays and escaping the pressure. Those are things Josh Hoover is going to have to do this weekend. I know Coach Dykes has said Chandler Morris is getting healthier. I still have to believe Josh Hoover is the starting quarterback until further notice. I'm anticipating Josh Hoover will be the starter for this game. And look, he did throw for 439 yards and 4 touchdowns against BYU. So he's shown big game potential at least, but this is a whole nother level. I mean, he's going to have a Chandler Morris Baylor-esque performance if TCU is going to win this game. At least that's my opinion, given where these two teams stand right now. But Anthony, what are your overall thoughts on this matchup and how TCU could fare against this Texas team, and ultimately how can TCU win this football game?
Yeah, this Texas team is feels different than the Texas teams of the last decade plus that TCU has gone up against in the Big 12. Just because it is built so strong on the front and defensive lines. It's a physical team. This is not the diva teams that brings in their 5-star talents that are actually don't much care to play football. This is a serious football team, and yeah, I think it is big time challenge for this offensive line for TCU is probably going to have the toughest time of the day, because I mean the defensive front for Texas, these are NFL guys. These are top of college football type performers that somehow that TCU offensive line that has not been able to really prevent anyone from getting through to the quarterback is going to have to try to slow down. I don't know that it's going to happen. It's going to take some scheming magic from Kendall Briles. It's going to take some Josh Hoover magic escaping that pressure and delivering balls on target out of that pressure. I think it is going to be a very, very tall task for that offensive line. And on the other side of the ball, I mean, pretty much every player on Texas is going to be really good. I mean, Texas's run game is one of the best in the conference, one of the best in the country. Jonathan Brooks has been elite. CJ Baxter, the true freshman, has been terrific in his role, kind of spelling Brooks for a breather. And while the offensive line has given them plenty of room to run and roam through defenses. So given how poorly TCU has played against the run the last 2 games, it's hard to imagine Jonathan Brooks being held in check here. I think there will have to be an extreme improvement in tackling and in scheme to hold those guys down. And even if you do, then you've got to deal with A.D. Mitchell and Xavier Worthy and Jatavian Sanders and Jordan Whittington and those big and or super fast receivers that, I would like to think that Josh Newton will hold his own on one side of the field. Avery Helm will be able to somewhat hold his own on the other side of the field. But this looks to be a game where it's a Jatavian Sanders game. Does he come out and catch a bunch of balls over the middle and break through the arm tackles of those safeties in the middle of the field? Because we've talked a lot about the missed tackles, and that safety group has the leading missed tackles on the team are all of the 3 safeties, Perry and Bradford and Clark, all have double-digit missed tackles on the season, and are the 3, I guess, worst offenders for that stat for TCU. And it's, I think Sanders had an opportunity last season to be the guy and had a couple drops. If he has cleaned up his drops, same with Xavier Worthy, if he's cleaned up his drops, both of them had opportunities in that big game in Austin last year to make things happen that just didn't happen. So, for TCU, it's going to take mistakes from Texas, which they've been prone to mistakes this season. If it is Malik Murphy, he's already thrown 3 interceptions in his 2 starts. Mm-hmm. He's been capable at managing the offense for the most part, but they've been hit by the turnover bug. They've been hit by the unable to score points in the red zone bug, like TCU has this season as well. Texas is down there at the bottom of the rankings with the Horned Frogs in that stat. And so if the TCU defense is able to, as it is intended, bend and not break, and then the offense hits some explosives, maybe you find something there. It feels a little bit like we're grasping at straws for positives for TCU in this one, just because there's been so few positives for TCU this season, and Texas has been quite good across the board this year. I mean, obviously, this team went into Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama. So despite its loss in the Red River game in Dallas, this is a very, very good football team. And TCU will have to, work some magic. And TCU's been able to do that against Texas. And, I think some of the Texas-ness of this, of where Texas can sometimes fall flat on its face when the expectations are so large. Part of that is being Texas, the expectations are always large, no matter whether you're actually good or actually mediocre. Everyone in burnt orange expects you to win the national championship every year. So living up to that expectation is not realistic. But, Texas, there was a lot of talk last week about for Texas's game versus Kansas State of, this is the game Texas usually loses. This is the time when Texas drops a game. And I disagree with that. That was a game Texas was going to have 100% of its focus. That was a game they had to have to stay alive in the Big 12 championship race, because Kansas State was its number one competitor for that spot.
Mm-hmm.
Now that Oklahoma has taken a loss, now that they've gotten that big win over Kansas State, Texas, this is the game against TCU every year is the game that Texas loses. This is the game where Texas takes its eye off the ball and loses that bit of perspective. I mean, you've seen the entire fan base freak out about being ranked in the college football playoff ranking a spot different from Oregon, and how, if that kind of if that's the thing that the actual team is worried about, whether a first week of November playoff committee ranking has you 7 or 8 or 6 or 5, you're not focused on playing this game in Fort Worth on Saturday. So, maybe that's just something that fans care about, and the players are going to come out and do their thing. It's certainly possible, but I think that's where TCU might have that slim chance here is, hey, catch them sleeping a little bit.
And we also need to see how excited Sonny Dykes likes to say that a lot. We need to be excited to play. And if TCU can't get up and get out of bed and be excited to play this game at home, where TCU's been good at home this year, 3-1 at home versus 1-4 on the road, playing at Amon G Carter, which is going to be almost certainly a full stadium against a top 10 team. If you can't be excited to play that game, then there's something seriously wrong. But you look at this rivalry, this matchup, TCU and Texas, since the Frogs entered the Big 12, 8-3, as I mentioned before, and there have been a lot of great moments for TCU. And we're going to have a roundtable coming out here in the next day or so, where we as a staff at Frogs of War shared some of our favorite memories from this TCU Texas matchup. And we wanted to share them because, as we know, Texas and Oklahoma are going to the SEC after this year. This may be the last time TCU and Texas play each other for a very long time, if not ever. And so, for me, there are a few memories that come up. I think back all the way to 2013 when I was a sophomore at TCU, and this was when Mac Brown is still the head coach at Texas, and they had a game in Fort Worth, which was delayed by, I want to say, 3 hours or so because of it was torrential downpour all night. And there were hardly anyone in the stadium. The student section was still pretty full, and the bleachers were just soaked. And we were finding ways to have fun in the bleachers, using them as a slip and slide, sliding up and down. I was sick as a dog the next morning, so probably wasn't my wisest decision there, but that was a fun little moment for me during that 2013 season, which was a pretty forgettable year for TCU football as a whole. I think back to 2015 and when I was a senior, and TCU just came out and crushed Texas 50-7 was the final score of that one. Trevon Boykin had 5 touchdown passes. Cavante Turpin, Josh Doxson, they combined for 6 touchdown receptions, just went scorched earth against the Longhorns. I think they combined for almost 300 receiving yards, just the two of them. And I think that's the most lopsided win that TCU has had over Texas since joining the conference. So that's a memorable one for me too. Recent history, we can't forget the Max Duggan rushing touchdown his freshman season, wearing the black and red uniforms.
Get your frogs up, right? Yeah,
Get
I
your
loved
frogs
it.
up, clinching that win over Texas with that big touchdown run. And that's on the broadcast when they said, Max Duggan is here. And that was his first really huge play as a starting quarterback for TCU. And then the defensive stand, I believe it was the following season where it's 33-31, TCU wins the game, and Texas looks like they're driving into the red zone. They're about to score,
They're
and
at the goal line.
they fumble. Yeah, they fumble the ball at the 1 yard. I think it was Joseph Broadnax who recovered that fumble, or it might have been Corey Bethley. He's one of those defensive tackles that just fell on the football right outside of the end zone, and
Garrett Wallow on the stop.
TCU gets away with a huge. I just remember everyone going crazy when that happened. It just looked like the situation was so dire, and the defense came up with one of the biggest plays they've made really over the last few years. So for me, those are some of the memories that stand out. I'm sure, if I thought long and hard about it, there'd be a lot more, but those are the big ones that stand out to me. Anthony, for you, what are your favorite moments or favorite memories from this matchup, TCU and Texas, since TCU's been in the Big 12?
Yeah, a lot of fun ones. I mean, that 2015 game was wild in the way that just TCU was completely dominant from day one. The game was over by the end of the first quarter. Maybe after like 2 drives, the game was over. TCU was just a much, much better football team that day. I think that might be the one where Texas players were tweeting about transferring and quitting football at halftime, like from the locker room. Great stuff. Maybe my favorite game that is one that I didn't even watch live or wasn't even at. So the 2012 game, I was on my honeymoon. We were in Dominican Republic and didn't watch the game at all, but loved that it came on that Thanksgiving. It's after that, Texas decided that they were not going to play TCU on Thanksgiving much more, and that was the end of that. But that it came after a bye week was the key thing there. Yes, I had a fall wedding, and shame on me. And I know there are the corners of college football internet that will say that's the worst thing you could possibly do in the world. So yes, but it was on a TCU bye week, so it was acceptable. But got to return from a honeymoon to watch the Longhorn Network showing replays of the Longhorns getting bested by TCU in TCU's first season in the Big 12, which was, for years and years, every Texas fan would just, TCU, your success doesn't mean anything because if you were in the Big 12, you could not last in the day-to-day grind. And in the first season in the conference, TCU goes to Austin and beats them on Thanksgiving. So, haha. I think 2014 is probably my actual favorite of the game, just because it meant so much to TCU. TCU was in pushing for the playoff, pushing for a conference championship, and went in there and smacked him. Josh Doxson just totally dominating the defensive backfield that, Texas, at least at the time, liked to claim itself as DBU, and Josh Doxson just ate their lunch in front of all of the Austin faithful out there. So yeah, pretty much every time they play, it's generally a pretty fun time for TCU fans. Even in like the 2021 loss, TCU was really close in that one. So it's it will be sad to lose this game because it means so much to a lot of people to beat Texas every year. You have that game on the schedule that is, well, this is a guaranteed win 80% of this, 70+% of the time for us. And it will make everyone really mad that Texas loses to TCU every year. So it's a bummer to lose that game. Texas gets to go take itself to the SEC and see what happens there. But yeah, I'll miss having this game on the schedule. Obviously, everyone who is a TCU fan probably has connections to the Texas Longhorns, or at least somebody who is unfortunately a fan of the Texas Longhorns. So it does always mean a lot to go win this game. And hopefully TCU can kick the Longhorns out of the conference with a loss here.
And that will segue nicely into our predictions here. And as usual, I'm going to predict TCU to win by the slimmest of margins. I have TCU winning this game 31-30. Again, it's going to take a lot. I mean, offensively, you've shown a lack of dedication to running the football over the last few weeks. You haven't done it very well. Josh Hoover is averaging 51 pass attempts per game since taking over the starting quarterback job for the injured Chandler Morris. Josh Hoover is going to have a incredible may not even be enough, but he's going to have a monster game. He's shown that he can do it. And look, you're TCU, you're 4-5. You lose the game, you fall to 4-6. Your season is on life support. You're playing at home. Last time you're going to play Texas, potentially a chance to go ruin their season. It's one thing to ruin another team's season. It's another thing to ruin Texas's season. And if these players can't come out and be excited and energized to play this game, there's something seriously wrong with the program. And I think TCU is going to come out, and maybe I'm being painfully optimistic here, but I just have a feeling TCU is going to come out and find a way to make this happen. So 31-30 is my final score prediction for this game. And I want TCU to ruin Texas's season. I would want nothing more with the way the season has gone, to have some positive to come out of this in what could maybe be the biggest positive of the whole season if TCU can win this game. So 31-30, that's my final prediction here.
Yeah, I hear you on the, if you can't get up for this game, what are you doing? I think you probably could have said that about the Texas Tech game when you've got your whole season on the line and your chance at bowl eligibility. You probably could have said that about the Kansas State game when you still had conference title implications potentially on the line. You could have said that about the Colorado game when you're coming off of a national championship embarrassment. I'm not sure that TCU is going to show that. Like you say, nothing would make TCU fans and probably most of college football happier than seeing TCU win this game and send Texas back to and it would guarantee that TCU will be continue to be the only team from the Big 12 and from Texas to have gone to the college football playoff and won a game. I think, Texas is obviously still very much alive in that conversation for the moment, but a loss to TCU would end all hopes of that for the Longhorns. So it's certainly big stakes for all parties involved, but I just, when it comes to prediction, my optimism has been wiped away this season. I've lost the ability to think that that's how it's going to go. If I'm giving an honest prediction here, my honest prediction is that Texas wins this game and wins it pretty handedly. The prediction I'll give in the roundtable is a 38-13 win for the Longhorns, where I just don't know how TCU's offense gets to 30 points against this Texas defense. I think the way to get to your 31-point margin, I mean, TCU is going to have to find defensive scores. TCU will maybe have to find special team scores that it hasn't really been able to generate, with Darius Davis creating touchdowns in the NFL for the Chargers now. So I think it would take big time mistakes from Texas to get to that 30-point threshold for TCU. And I think Texas is very susceptible to those mistakes and very much could make that happen. But I think in all likelihood, Texas still, similar to the way TCU went into Austin last year with everything, including a national championship, up for grabs. Texas comes into this game and maybe TCU hangs around for a little bit, but eventually, I continue to think that Adonai Mitchell is the most important player on this team, that he was the number one transfer addition in the conference, maybe in the country. And he is the difference maker in this game and for this Texas team this season. They've had lots of talented guys come through there and who are there on this roster right now, but adding him is he's just so consistent. And, if it's Josh Newton chasing him around all day, great. That just means Avery Helm is going to have to somehow keep up with Xavier Worthy. And there's just too many ways that this team can cut TCU, and too many ways that TCU can allow themselves to be cut. So I've got the Longhorns taking this and walking away into their new SEC future, at least having one final scoreboard, if not a Big 12 overall scoreboard over the Horned Frogs.
And we'll ultimately see what happens on Saturday. Again, it's a 6:30 kickoff, nationally televised game on ABC. Get out to Amon G Carter Stadium. Wear your purple. TCU going with the all-purple uniforms. They put out the social media teaser with the purple Lamborghini in the background. TCU going with the all-purples for the first time this year. And we will see what happens in this game and also in the Big 12. There are a lot of games going on in conference play this weekend. And I think this might be the first time all season where we've had games at 4 different times. We have a morning game between Texas Tech and Kansas in Lawrence, 11 a.m. on FS1. A couple afternoon games. Baylor at Kansas State. This is the dreaded ESPN Plus slot, 2 p.m. kickoff in Manhattan. Oklahoma State hitting the road to take on UCF at 2:30. That'll be on ESPN. 6 o'clock game. We have West Virginia at Oklahoma. This might be I think this is going to be the most interesting game outside of TCU Texas for me. If West Virginia can go on the road and somehow hand Oklahoma its 3rd consecutive loss and stay in the mix for a Big 12 title game spot, that'll be interesting to watch. 6 p.m. kickoff on Fox. Cincinnati goes to Houston. Another 6 p.m. kickoff. That'll be on FS1. And then we have it's not Pac-12 after dark. We have some Big 12 after dark at 9:15 as Iowa State goes to take on BYU, and that'll be on ESPN as well. So Brett Yormark is probably very happy looking at the slate of games, with games kicking off at 4 different times. We've got morning, we've got afternoon, we've got evening, and we've got some Big 12 after dark. Anthony, what are your thoughts? Quick thoughts on this slate of games and just early impressions on some of these matchups.
I think this week in the Big 12 might have some surprises. If it doesn't come from the game in Fort Worth, I think there's a chance here that one of these ranked teams takes a loss that everyone thinks that it shouldn't. In our staff picks, I've fallen a bit behind, so I'm attempting to catch up by picking some of those upsets. But I think there is a chance that UCF at home in Orlando takes down Oklahoma State. I think that's very much on the table. I think that Texas Tech is getting a little bit better. I think they're still a worse team than Kansas, but with Baron Morton, at quarterback back. I think that it's a better team than it was earlier in the season, and could certainly go to Lawrence and pull a stunner there. And yeah, I mean, I think although West Virginia is a pretty heavy underdog in Norman, I I, I think that that's going to be a pretty interesting game, like you say. I think it could be a fun one. So I think these Big 12 favorites, where the conference has all these teams in the rankings and is looking really strong. I don't know. Watch out. I think there's going to be a little more chaos this week than you might think, given that all of the ranked teams are playing unranked conference foes. So I think it'll be a really fun week in the conference. And like you say, you get to spend all day with the Big 12, starting from, the morning kickoff all the way through the late night cap. So it should be a fun week.
Yeah, no, I have a weird feeling about Iowa State and BYU for some reason. I think I picked Iowa State to win this game, but I picked Iowa State last week, and they let me down against Kansas at home, and something about a 9:15 kickoff in Provo could spell a little bit of trouble for the Cyclones. Even though I did pick Iowa State for this game, I'm not sure if Keaton Slovis is going to be healthy for this game. I don't think he played last week, so that's going to hurt the Cougars if he doesn't play. But who knows, in college football, sometimes strange things can happen. So it's going to be a great weekend in the Big 12, and we're going to continue to recap all of the football results in the Big 12 at frogsofwar.com and on the Frogs Up podcast here. So if y'all haven't checked out Austin McGee and his Big 12 recaps on frogsofwar.com, please do so. He does a tremendous job covering that for us. And we're getting to the end of our podcast here. We just have a couple more items to hit on. TCU Football had 4 players invited to participate in the East-West Shrine Bowl this year. This is one of the annual senior showcases. Well, it's not really senior anymore because they just passed the rule that's going to allow juniors to play in these games for whatever reason. I don't really get that at all. These games are for the senior players who may not get the opportunity at the combine or anywhere else to get noticed. But nevertheless, there are 4 Horned Frogs: Brandon Coleman, Jared Wiley, Josh Newton, and Mark Perry, who have been invited to participate in this game. TCU had a couple players invited to play in this game last year. I can't remember exactly who it was, but this is one
I
of
think
many.
it was Trey Tomlinson and maybe Alana Lee.
Yeah, I think, you have the Senior Bowl, which there were several TCU players in that. I'm sure there'll be more in this game. There's the East-West Shrine Bowl. I think there's one other game that maybe Amari DiMercato and Alana Lee played. I can't remember, but nevertheless, it's a good opportunity for these players to get some more tape out there in front of NFL scouts as they get a little bit of a head start on the 2024 NFL draft. So congratulations to those 4 seniors who will be hopefully participating in that game, getting another chance to represent the Horned Frogs there. And then our final item this morning, I was about to say this evening, I had to correct myself there. TCU soccer, we talked about the Horned Frogs bowing out of the Big 12 tournament in the early going, losing to UCF, and TCU being a bubble team for the College Cup. The selection show was broadcast on Monday, and unfortunately, TCU soccer will not be participating in the NCAA tournament this year. So TCU ultimately finishing with a 10-6-3 overall record, going 6-2-2 in the Big 12 regular season, finishing 3rd in the conference during the regular season. A disappointing finish for sure for head coach Eric Bell and the Horned Frogs. This is a really talented team that I think just left some results out there. A couple tough non-conference results, Butler being one of them, and then just not finishing the season on the highest of notes. You draw Houston, you lose to Texas, you lose to UCF. I think you had 8 second half goals allowed over those 3 matches. So just a really tough finish for TCU, and unfortunate that this team is not going to be able to continue its journey into the postseason.
Yeah, I mean, they had every opportunity, played a really tough non-conference schedule, lost games to top seeds, Florida State, Penn State. I think you're okay losing those games, but losing to Butler, drawing with UAB, drawing with Houston, the way that you lost to UCF and to Texas, um, you know, and even the draw at BYU, you had every chance to have won those games, and to kind of fall on the wrong side of those results. It's unfortunate that it's kind of hard to believe that finishing third in a pretty stacked Big 12 doesn't get you into the tournament, but I think it's somewhat fair, and it's unfortunate for this Horned Frogs team, and we'll see what they bring back next year. And looks like with the early signing day for soccer, they've brought in a bunch of freshman talent as well coming in for next year, so should be right back in the thick of things, and one of the top teams in the conference again next year. But hopefully can put together the results that put some more wins in the win column, and take some of those marquee matches over those big teams. It's great to schedule those teams, and sometimes it's okay to get a draw against those good teams, but putting some big time wins on the board next season would go a long way into starting a new streak of reaching the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, a lot of signing day news for TCU, not just TCU men's basketball and TCU soccer, but several other programs, men's golf, women's golf, men's tennis, beach volleyball, others,
baseball with like they were
baseball
like
with the top
third
five.
in the top 5 in the country signing class. I mean, big time stuff for those programs. Absolutely.
Absolutely. And congratulations to all of the prep players who finalized their commitments to TCU. And as we always say, Fort Worth is a great place to be, and TCU is a great place to be. So exciting to see all of that news pop up on social media this week, as we will get ready to transition out of here this morning. That is everything we have for our midweek edition of the Frogs Up TCU Sports Podcast. I am Russ Hodges. That is Anthony North. We will be back in a few days here, Sunday, to recap the Texas football game. Hopefully, we are talking about a win. We will also have more men's basketball and women's basketball items to hit on, as the men's team will be playing against Omaha this evening. And we will also talk about the women's team's victory over Texas A&M Kingsville. And we will also recap the results of week 11 in the Big 12 conference for football. Hard to believe that we're already getting close to the end of the regular season here, but as they say, time flies when you are having fun. And so we'll have another big episode coming up on Sunday here on Frogs Up. And for those who want to continue to follow us online and support us online at frogsofwar.com, be sure to follow us on Facebook or Twitter at frogsofwar, and continue to read our content at frogsofwar.com, where we continue to cover everything going on with TCU sports: football, basketball, baseball, soccer, volleyball, and more. With that, I think we will sign off for today, and we will sign off with Frogs Up.
Frogs Up.